Well, when Barack Obama was sworn in as US president in January, it was obvious that no new president had inherited such a catalogue of problems since Roosevelt in 1933. So, faced with domestic, economic and international crises, how's he done?
As Zhou Enlai said of the French Revolution, it's too early to tell. I would say, although his popularity rating has fallen quite precipitously in the last 6 months, down to about 50%, I think he's done a pretty good job. If I measure it by the things I know something about, at least a little about, I think that he threaded the needle over Afghanistan. Took a long time doing it. Even General McChrystal said here in London that he thought it was, we don't have the luxury of rushing to a decision on this, and he didn't. It took 3 months. And when he did come up with the decision, he was criticized by many for having, on the one hand, said we'll surge with 30,000 troops, on the other hand, we'll start drawing down in 18 months. But my sense of it is that anybody who knows Afghanistan, who's covered that conflict at first hand, are themselves very conflicted about this. It's a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation.
So at least
and he
worse
has
was what
chosen
said.
A policy which leaves his options open, and I think it would have been unwise not to. So I think if we take that as a measure of the man, I would say he's done really quite well so far.
Although I hasten to point out, this is the man who won the Nobel Peace Prize or received it a month after, or in the same month as he took the decision to put more troops in Afghanistan, which some people see as a bit of a conflict.
I believe he disappointed many people in the Middle East in particular, and also in the West here. First, because he accepted a Nobel Peace Prize he should reject, and he should actually be defiant. He's a man who promoted changes, and I think he should prove he's different, saying, look, you know, I don't deserve it, I'm not going to take it. So it's true he donated the money to charities, but it's not enough. This is one thing. Second thing, when it comes to the Middle East and to Afghanistan in particular, I believe he committed a grave mistakes. The surge could be his downfall. Simply, it wouldn't work. And he is looking for Al-Qaeda, which is, you know, the least existence in Afghanistan in itself.
Much less important than Taliban or the Pakistan Taliban or...
Definitely, you know, Pakistan is more important. And we know that Al-Qaeda now is in Yemen and Somalia and North Africa, you know, barely existed in Afghanistan as it used to be, maybe 300, maybe 500 people. And he concentrated all the time on Afghanistan. We know the surge wouldn't work simply because he is trying to repeat the same experience of Iraq. Afghanistan is completely different when you compare it to the Iraq. It's very, you know, hostile.
It's much bigger, it's much more fractious, it's much more divided. I want to come back to Israel and the Palestinians in a minute, but one of the things that does strike me is he's not that bothered about Europe at all. In other words, you know, he pays, Europe is at peace, so maybe that's a good thing, but it's not really on his radar screen.
It's not, because we're not really very important to what's going on at the moment. I think we have to remember in thinking about him that no president has ever come to power with such a terrible list of catastrophes on his plate. I mean, two wars of America's own founding and the disaster on Wall Street and world financial situation, huge expectations that he might be able to do something in the Middle East, picking up from a catastrophic previous president, so there were huge expectations. He built up his own expectations by his extraordinary intelligence and eloquence and his ability to move people, not in sort of demagoguery, but the sheer style and content and depth of the things that he says in speeches led one to think he was a man of such wisdom he could sort it all, no problem. A year on, why isn't it all fixed? Well, you know, it's not. It's incredibly difficult. I'm very glad that he's the person there trying to do it, but lowering expectations should be his next task.
I mean, John's undoubtedly right that it is too early to tell, but you do see over the course of the year some of the things that he does and some of the things he tries to do. For instance, on healthcare, building a consensus behind healthcare rather than staking out and picking, you know, friends and enemies, perhaps cutting the cloth to suit what the politics are of the United States, but others would say compromising too much. And he's done that in foreign policy as well. So, I mean, I don't know, how do you see this?
Well, I think he falls on his own sword rhetorically, as you say. He was so good in his speeches. And that one singular phrase, yes, we can, led the world to think, here's a saviour. And that created over-expectations, which no American president can ever deliver, because you forget in the American system you have two governments. You have the administration of the White House, and you have Congress. Congress is called the other arm of government, if I recall rightly from my years serving there. And so you have immediately to be very careful about your aspirations. Someone is going to stop him in his tracks. And given this problem, he's done modestly well. He's got his health program through, not a very impressive one, but it's some progress. The Peace Prize you can't hold against him because that was awarded by an independent body, and he used it in his speech in Oslo, I think, to good effect, really educating almost his audience that, you know, peace does not mean not being able to fight. The Romans had that famous old saying, if you want peace, you have to prepare for war. I mean, so he is a realist in that respect. And you can't withdraw overnight. That's my last point, Barry. You can't withdraw overnight from Afghanistan. You leave that country to the worst crimes against humanity that the world has ever seen. And that will, in the eyes of the world, damage his reputation if you simply left Afghanistan.
You know, when he said, you know, there is just war, there is no just war. You know, there is no war to create peace, and we can see.
Never, no war ever.
No,
you're a complete pacifist.
Yes, you know, you know, I believe in
the Second World War.
Second World War.
Well, I was going to say, Pat, the Intifada. I was going to say, is that? I mean, you regard that as just
a war. The Intifada is, you know, there is occupied territories, and those people would like to have their territories back, and they were just Intifada. It was peaceful, most of it. So that's what I mean. You know, when he said, can we say the war in Afghanistan is a just war? You know, when the whole country is dismembered and it's complete a failed state. The war in Iraq is a justified war. If we will, you know, maybe the Second World War, maybe it was a bit different. But when we look at the recent wars, the American wars in particular, which he was referring to, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan, I don't believe these are just wars.
Kosovo was a just war.
I mean,
Slobodan Milosevic was a just war. Kosovo was just to rid Serbia and that part of the Balkans from that dictator who stopped at nothing when it came to trampling upon human rights. That was a just war.
I thought the speech in Oslo was absolutely masterful. Document. I thought it was one of the most impressive public addresses that have been given in my lifetime.
Indeed, a number of Republicans, I was in Washington at the time, a number of Republicans who were not fans of the president said that to me, both privately and
I thought it was to be
too.
compared with the speech he made during his election campaign on race, when he was confronted with a possibly campaign-ending circumstance with the pastor. And he took himself off the campaign train for 3 days and came back with a speech which anybody who knows the conflict that's been in America over race in the last 50, 60, 100 years regarded similarly as a threading of the needle. And
speeches.
Words matter. Words matter.
He's
good, but so do actions. I mean,
he's good in speaking. Okay, he delivered excellent speeches when he took over, when he swore, you know, when he went to the Middle East, to Cairo, and gave a fantastic speech. But what happened after that?
The hand of friendship and
exactly.
so on. But you tell me, I mean, how has the dealings with... First of all, I think you congratulated him for being interested in the Middle East at the start of his presidency, because that was kind of unusual.
All of them
what has he done? I mean, how...
You know, again, he raised the expectation on the Middle East. He said he will actually go ahead with the peace process. He will go ahead with the setting up independent Palestinian state. And he said, you know, negotiation should continue only when the Israeli frees all kind of settlements in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Fantastic. Good speeches. We loved it. We said, this is the man who will stand against this right-wing Israeli government, and he will actually push the peace process ahead. For the first time, we could have fruits. But what happened? He just climbed down, and he said, now we should go to negotiation without freezing the settlements. And he disappointed everybody. And in Afghanistan, people expect him actually to say, look, this is an unwinnable war. We are not going to continue. It is better to leave Afghanistan to Afghani, to Taliban.
To the Taliban?
Why not?
To the Taliban?
Taliban
did you see the way that the Taliban rule? You did?
Yes, I did.
You went to see, you saw bin Laden, as I recall.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, right.
Taliban was safe. And recently, American general said, you know, Afghanistan was much safer during Taliban rules than it is now. That's what the American